Dick Frazier said that the release of 71 leaders during the summer significantly enhanced dialogue and reconciliation in Ethiopia. And your sense of whether that's an understatement, overstatement, or about right. She also said that the U.S. has seen allegations of human rights abuses conducted by all parties. This is including reports of burned villages and population displacements. And I wonder, very often in a situation, obviously governments, and we deal government to government, and groups that we either like or dislike or neutral on, yes, we'll raise issues about them, but we deal with governments. That's to whom we provide foreign aid. That's with whom we have a relationship, diplomatic and otherwise. And I'm wondering if that kind of statement kind of says, well, everybody's wrong, therefore, we're not going to engage ourselves in one way or the other, except to say we support human rights abuse investigation and so on and so forth. I think it kind of takes some of the pressure off the Mellis government. At least that's the sense I got. But the reconciliation issue, whether or not the release of the 71, and you should want to speak to that, Doctor, because you are one of them. And then if you could also speak, Mrs. Sarifi, about the issue you and your recommendations talk about how we need to fully ensure that the provisions of the lay law are followed up on. You should recall, asked questions regarding whether or not U.S. Training and whether or not U.S. support of any kind is any way complicit in any of these atrocities. I have always been concerned that we don't track people that we train. And if we do, I can't wait to see where and how, because very often when I ask those questions, I get redacted copies of who it is that we trained from our administration, and that would include the Clinton administration as well. So I wonder if you could speak to, are there any allegations of U.S. trained personnel committing atrocities? I know that's very hard to come by. Walk around with nameplates on, and we don't publish who it is, what colonels, lieutenants, captains, or anyone else that we train. But are there allegations of that, of U.S. complicity, wittingly or unwittingly, in that kind of human rights abuse on the ground? And again, I didn't get a clear picture from all of you about the issue of how many people are we talking about. If anyone has any such numbers, it would be very helpful, and maybe they're just hard to come by. And on the demonstration killings, another very potent way of getting people to be compliant, and obviously a gross human rights abuse, as well as the rape that you spoke to earlier, that Human Rights Watch has been able to document. That is an atrocity, again, that just, it's reminiscent of the ongoing problems in Darfur and every other place where genocide, as I think you pointed out so well, most people forget. Genocide is in whole or in part. You don't have to completely obliterate a people, but when you systematically, in whole or in part, and in part this certainly seems to be what we're talking about here, it does raise the level. And if you would, speak to the issue as to whether or not the UN Human Rights Council has looked at this genocide issue, whether or not an attempt has been made. And we also have a convention on genocide and a panel of experts empowered by the UN and the international community to look into those issues. Have they taken this up as well?
Thank you, Ranking Smith. One of the things that I wanted also to mention when I was submitting my testimony, it is in two parts. The one I was reading as a paper and the 2007 Ogaden Human Rights Report, which I have sent on Friday. In it, there are lists of names of people that have disappeared, that have been killed, that have been jailed, that have been kept incommunicado for a long time. So there's definitely that. The additional thing that I would like to highlight with regards to your previous question about the numbers is the Ogaden has been cut off from everybody for a while. So it has been really hard for us researching and sending people to risk their lives to talk to these people and document. So the numbers are the thousands. When you talk to people on the ground in the Ogaden and they say to you, yes, few people have been released, but we fear that the jails are being emptied so that they can be filled with Ogadenis. And the jails in the major cities in Ogaden like Qabri Daharre and Dagahbur and Jigjiga and Fiq are overcrowded, and they're also creating further health risks because they're really substandard. So with regards to numbers, they are the thousands. Whether we have had chance to really have anybody investigate this, we were really happy to see the recent U.S. fact-finding mission, United Nations fact-finding mission. We're hoping that maybe the U.S. will also send another fact-finding mission. What we are hearing in the Ogaden, we produce reports that are 70 pages on a yearly basis at the sort of like the scratch on the surface. There's much more. And here is a region that is 10 times the size of New Jersey that has been isolated from the international community and from recently the Red Cross and Médecins Sans Frontières. So the Mullah regime, as well as previous regimes, have really been successful at isolating this group of the territory and really cutting off. So we have been suffering in isolation, and it's recent that we're welcoming that it's being at least noticed, and we are here today. So the numbers are, sir, in the thousands, and we need to do more to really follow up as to what it is that is taking place in terms of crimes against humanity and in terms of genocide, because there are, and they can be corroborated. I had no idea what the human rights speaker was going to say today when I did my research, but there seems to be so much similarities and corroborated evidence here that is documenting there is human rights violation, there is war against crimes against humanity, and there is definitely elements of genocide that needs to be pursued further. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
If I may, we have come across allegations that U.S.-trained troops and certainly equipment may be involved, but certainly the perception of that link is quite high. We share your frustration with the failures of the Department of Defense and the State Department to always provide information adequate to implement the Leahy Law. We've had this problem in Indonesia most recently. But we continue, but this is something that we believe that even within the parameters of current U.S. policy, the State Department can do a much better job of pressing the Ethiopian government to assure this Congress that, in fact, United States military training and equipment are not being used to perpetrate the very serious crimes, war crimes that we've seen. In terms of the number of prisoners, I actually, thanks to the marvels of modern technology, used my BlackBerry to ask my colleagues to see how many they were. By and large, we have heard the same thing. It's important to point out that in addition to those who are detained as mainstream opposition, there are hundreds, mostly of young men, who are detained on very flimsy accusations of being members of the OLF or the ONLF or other members. But as you pointed out, it's impossible for us to know exactly what the numbers are.